It's that time again. Time for some real talk about real issues to enhance your real life. Whatever you think, whatever you know, whatever you feel, Tanya doesn't mind talking about it. Get ready for some real talk that is always rated R, because Talk with Tanya has got to be relevant. Talk with Tanya has got to be refreshing. But most importantly, Talk with Tanya has got to be real. Tune in right now for Real Talk with Tanya White.
Welcome once again to the Real Talk with Tanya White show. When you hear this is going to be one of the last shows in April, because May, and if you're in the Louisville area, you know it's Derby time. You're going to hear this April 29th, and we're closing out April with a bang. Well, we're going to close it out with a little savviness, okay? Y'all got to introduce her for a few minutes when I was doing the Today's Woman. Most Admired Woman nominees. She is in that. You better go vote because May 2nd is the deadline. But I have adopted her as my niece now because she is savvy. She is a person who is about the community. She's a person who has a vision, and even if it don't work out, Savvy's like, I'm gonna do whatever. So welcome once again to the show, Miss Savvy Hughes. Hey, Niecy.
What's up, Auntie? How you doing today?
How you doing? Now, tell our audience who is listening for this whole 30 minutes. We got whole 30 minutes now. And y'all, she will be a regular on this show because I love real talk with real people. And she meets the rated R brand of real talk, real relevant and refreshing. Okay. So you will hear Miss Savvy on here a lot. So Savvy Hughes, tell our audience who you are, where you came from, and how you got to the person we're going to hear today.
Yeah, so if you missed our 15-minute Most Admired Woman nominee, first of all, go back and watch that.
Boom.
But if you didn't, the short version is, hey, y'all, I'm Savvy Hughes. I'm 25. I have been in Louisville for the last 5-6 years, but I'm by way of Hodgenville, Kentucky. If you don't know where that's at, just think of E-Town, and then I'm like right out the way of there. And if you don't know where that is, Google it. But I am a community empowerment and social impact consultant. That's my little magical term I made up for myself, and it's a fun way of saying I do all things community. So I do a little bit of everything from policy and legislation work to community advocacy and empowerment and community and grassroots organizing. Most of my work is centered in youth engagement and youth advocacy, helping youth experiencing adverse experiences, and then working with general population folks who are experiencing houselessness, housing insecurity, substance use, recovery, all things above, making sure people get the resources they need. And then in part of that, that's kind of that micro direct service level. I really do a lot on the macro level of really trying to break down and rebuild systems. So taking those systems and really pushing for policy and legislation, making sure that community organizations and agencies that are working towards solutions for these populations, that they're actively involving those populations, and making sure that people with lived experiences really get to kind of dictate what they get and help shape those. As a person with lived experience, houselessness, addiction, it's really important to me. And I understand what that was like when I was trying to get resources. And so I want to make sure that those resources are being distributed evenly across the board, if you will.
Yeah. So y'all, she is just 25, just a fourth of a century. And she is focused. Savvy, you are focused. And a lot of young people are focused. Briefly tell us a story back in Hodgenville, why this became your passion. You said you lived it, but give us a brief insight why it is a part of who you are.
Yeah, so growing up where I did, I'm from a relatively small town. It's not the smallest of small towns, but it's pretty dang on small. And so you've got a poor small town, and then you take that section of town and find the poorest, smaller part of that town. And I'm from there. And so I remember as a kid, I took the bus and I had to walk part way uphill, downhill in the snow. And so every day on the way back from school, the bus would drop me off on the side of town that I walked from, and there's a little soup kitchen. There was one for the whole county that I passed, and I would stop there most days, and that's where I would eat. And as I was there, I really became part of that community and folks who gathered from volunteers and staff and other people in the community who utilized that service. It was more than just a kitchen. Shout out Warm Blessing Soup Kitchen is located right on the edge of Elizabethtown. They still operating. And from just visiting, I ended up kind of working. I ended up helping in the kitchen and sweeping up and from there, being one of the younger folks there, and Facebook was still kind of relatively new at the time. I was able to work with the director, Miss Linda Funk, at the time. And I ended up started kind of doing the social media stuff. And then we helped organize fundraisers to make sure that the kitchen was getting, money for the resources, because everything was donation based and nobody was getting paid. And I really saw the need, and
how old were you, Savvy, at that time?
This probably went on from when I was 13 or 14 up until I was about 16, 17. So it wasn't a super long period of time, but those are really formative years for youth, right? And I was very privileged, to have that resource in my community, in a community that did not have a lot of resources, but to also have the privilege to be able to spend time there and to be okay with knowing that I was the girl who stopped at the soup kitchen every day. So there was definitely a certain level of privilege there, and I was able to recognize that and see that from a very young age. And, I know how I felt internally and what I didn't realize. And I could only imagine how many other people were going through very different but similar, situations and feelings. And I wanted to make sure that people didn't feel the way that I felt. And that was also the time that I realized, as I got older and kind of got into the helping do the fundraising and helping do the social media and helping, organize events, that I realized just how hard it is for good people to do basic things to help people in their community. The amount of red tape that goes into that, the amount of permits and hurdles and money and regulations and just all of the different things, and the bias, right? The racism, the structural racism, the structural poverty, right? That I realized was meant to keep us where we were. And that's what really got me into the macro side of things. And being like, as a person who needs something, if I have a basic human need, you have a basic human need. So many people, I shouldn't have to jump through a bunch of hoops and barriers that prevent me from getting that basic human need. And so I'm kind of there I want to shift that. I want to change that. Really my most recent example and one of my biggest goals, I don't know how I'm gonna get it done yet, but we navigate, we still early stages, is here in Louisville, we have something called the Common Assessment. If you are somebody who's experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity, your first step to any kind of service is taking this Common Assessment. And if you've ever taken it or you've ever looked at it, you will very much realize, A, it's antiquated, right? It's old. And B, it is very much designed to appropriate resources to what I'm going to refer to in the general population and world as the drunk white man under the bridge. That's terrible. Very privileged aspect when you talk about the very diverse situations and people seeking resources in this community, right? So this test, by saying that, is not designed for 90% of the individuals taking it, seeking assistance and resources. It is not inclusionary to people of color. It is not inclusionary to being preventative for folks who are already not privileged to generational wealth, who are part of generational poverty. if you are trying to be preventative in that, right? It is really a disservice, and it's really hard. And so in today's landscape, a lot of times, I'm not saying people have to lie, but sometimes you can't always tell the whole truth when you take that.
Let's dig deeper in there, because you have, when we talk about the system, and look, y'all can already hear she is wise beyond her years. So much stuff that she has said is the reason why it is so important for us to, first of all, support community organizations like One Blessing. As you can see, that One Blessing is power. Names are powerful. That One Blessing has created a whole movement in just one individual, Savvy Hughes, and many more. First of all, support. And those who are supporting organizations who don't know where the funding's coming from, keep doing it, because one soul, one person can be just so transformed by what you're doing, and it's going to work out in the end. That's what I wanted to say when I was hearing your story. But also, you are so wise beyond your years in how you have, first of all, been able to identify the systematic lies. Systematic barriers.
That's what it is, girl. It's lies.
It's a systematic saying that they're trying to help the whole, and when it's really a sliver of who they're trying to help. Now, let me go back before we go dig deep in that. How did you articulate and be like, something ain't right in this system, and looking at an assessment like that and say, this is very exclusionary? And how did you how was you able to be able to do that, Savvy? Because you're 25, and I'm be honest, at 25, I was living my best life out here. I wasn't thinking about no community. I wasn't. So, but how did you pinpoint? Let me dig deeper into this, because I got to empower the community.
Yeah, and I think it's two things, right? It's the community that I was in when I started really seeing those kind of diagnostics and assessments, and then B, the community that I grew up in. I was very, very privileged. While I wasn't privileged with wealth growing up, or really nice things and brand new clothes and nice cars and private schools, I was rich in community. And I was rich in diversity, and I was rich in culture.
Y'all heard that? Rich. Say it again, Savvy.
What did I say?
Rich in community, rich in diversity, rich in culture.
Yeah. And as a white woman, white individuals are born inherently with a wealth of privilege. No matter what your socioeconomic level is, you can be white and still be on the lowest end of generational poverty and still have privilege and experience a level of privilege that
you better speak. Talk to that, because there are millions of people it just went over their head what you just said.
Oh yeah. And I'll tell you what it is. And a direct experience, like I said, I grew up in, if you take this poor small town and then you divide it up to like the poorest part of the poor small town, that's where I'm from. The town is not all white. I grew up in a predominantly Black part of town. My neighbors were Black. I grew up, my parents were friends, and that was our community, right? I did not grow up directly around a lot of white people in the woods. It wasn't like that. But so I was exposed at a very young age to diversity, and I'm not saying that there wasn't a lot of hate and anger and prejudice and flat out racism too in my town. But I was very privileged to grow up accommodating, to that. And it's that experience. I drove home. I was driving home one night, and an officer stopped me. I was like 17. And he asked me why I was driving through that part of town. Was I safe? Was I okay? And at first I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I live here. And it clicked for me later that officer was white. And he wanted to make sure, was I okay? Was I lost? Why was I coming through this part of town? Because, that officer didn't have to tell me at the time, but he had a higher standard, and acceptance for white people than he did black folks. And that he had a bias that I was unsafe, that I was probably going to get into some sort of idea of trouble that he had. And it realized I was treated differently. And that cop didn't know that I lived there. He didn't know that I was poor. He didn't know, he didn't know any socioeconomic stuff about me. All he knew was what was face value was that I was a young white female. And that told me there that there is an inherent level of privilege, whether I like it or not, whether I agree with it or not, no matter how poor I am, how rich I am, educated, uneducated, I am treated differently. And that level of community, right? That level of seeing, and then when we talk to tie that back to the investment, the assessments, right? I know that test is made and is going to be more beneficial for somebody like me seeking services than somebody like you. And part of that is because I've stayed in community and I've talked to folks that are going through roughly when we talk about economic and housing insecurity and the same issues. And the only difference is that you're Black and I'm white.
Yes.
There's a problem with that assessment. There's a problem with language, right? Because if you grow up, and you are in a community where you're speaking a lot of African-American vernacular English, right? And I grew up, say, in a suburb and I talk real proper and the way that I'm going to be able to articulate is going to get me more resources.
Yes.
Because I identify with the language that's already being used.
Yes. Now, right there. Y'all, I keep telling y'all she's wise beyond her years. Now, how do you communicate this? What you just said? Because I understand wholeheartedly what you mean. But maybe take someone who is your age or younger.
Yeah.
Who may not have experienced what you experienced. Okay, so you've been in Louisville. Take someone who is your age, but they were privileged living in Louisville, went to one of the top public schools, Mel Emanuel or the Brown School, live on the east side of town, and they have not had that experience that you had because they have had the privilege to be in a certain community within a whole community. So what people don't understand, Louisville is a big city, but we have a lot of sub communities. And if they're making it like you don't even have, if you live on Westport Road or anywhere, you really don't have to go outside of that community to get any of the services that you need. You see what I'm saying? You don't have to venture out. So if you grew up in that bubble and someone is your age and you all just meeting, you're talking about, and they're like, I've never experienced that. How do you communicate that even though you haven't experienced it, it has happened? Because some people base their worldview on their world, their small world view. So tell us how you will communicate that, because that is what is needed to enlighten people. That
And I think it's that out of sight, out of mind context, right? I don't see it or I've never experienced it, so it can't be real. And I'll tell you, the first thing there that I like to ask is, do you feel connected to your neighbor? Like, and not in no like weird
right
emotionally. No, like, do you feel that when you talk to your neighbor, like, when you do that little universal nod and wave that they do, like it's not like a secret fuck you, like you know what I'm saying? Like they really be like, hey neighbor, like do you feel connected with your neighbor? And then I ask them, I'm like, you feel connected because that's all that you see and you experience.
Boom.
You cannot be connected to something that you don't see and experience. And it is not a bad thing for you to have grown up without those experiences.
Yes.
I don't want to
say that again. It's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
It's just a thing.
I don't want to live in a world where these people who have nice privilege, come from wealth, whatever, have to live through all the trauma and the structural issues that everybody else does. It's not what I'm saying. I want nobody to have to go through that.
Yeah.
And that starts with, you have to come outside of your neighborhood to be connected to others. And have you, hey, and a lot of that is saying, hey, have you ever actually like been downtown and not like for 2 hours for an event? Have you ever gone to, Shawnee Park, like actually been to the park and hung out and walked around the park instead of just hearing about it on the news? And a lot of times,
and then vice versa.
Exactly.
Because that's one thing I do with my students. I try to enlighten them, because on the other hand, those students that I taught who had never been outside of Shawnee Park or the West End, they had some barriers to thinking as well. And so if we all wanted to make a community impact and a social impact, we must, and I love what you said, we've got to venture out and really feel connected. Because when we don't, it shows up in the workplace. In the workplace, whatever business you are makes policies for their clients, processes, assessments, especially when you're in social services. So if you have not ventured out and you don't feel some sort of connection, those policies, those assessments that you make, procedures will be biased, won't they, Savvy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said, about the people that you work with, right? And the people that you serve, which is the same thing works inversely, right?
Yes.
If I come from a community and I had never left my small town, I would have stayed small-minded. Now, I understand in this, though, that those folks face a separate barrier. There's a barrier difference here, right? These people up here, they choose not to leave because they're comfortable, because they have comfortability, right? They have the grocery stores in their neighborhood. They have these resources in their neighborhood. They have a certain level of generational wealth. That don't mean they're all rich. I'm not saying everybody in Middletown is a millionaire.
Right.
But they have a little more access to wealth and comfort than somebody who has lived their whole life in the West End.
Yeah.
Because in the West End, I have to leave my community.
Yes.
I have to go to Walmart. I live in a desert, right? Yeah. I don't have the money for a car. There are no adequate bus lines in my neighborhood. And if there are bus lines, they don't run on time, right? So you have a different barrier, right? You have a mindset barrier here where they're just comfortable. And it doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean they're evil. It doesn't mean they don't understand. They're just comfortable. They've never had a reason to leave, so they don't. And out of sight, out of mind, how could I really imagine or be connected with somebody on this side of town? Because I don't have a reason to go there.
Right.
Go for an event. Whereas if you're over here, you may not leave because you've never had the opportunity to leave. You may not have had the ability and the privilege to just be able to go to the other side of town and explore just because you want to. There are a lot more. This is mental barrier and this is structural barrier.
Come on. And they're both a barrier.
In order for us to really talk about breaking these structural barriers, I think a lot of that is we can't wait on the government to give us money to build grocery stores in our neighborhood. You know why? Because they're who made sure you don't have grocery stores in your neighborhood in the first place.
Yep.
So it really belongs on community, right? And folks like me going to my connected that are going to connect with me easier up here to come back and say, help invest in here so that I can deconstruct those structural barriers ourselves. Because if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it. Nobody's going to save us but us. And we can't keep counting on the government to do something that they done showed us. The system's not broken. The system's not broken. It's working as designed.
As designed. Come on, Seth. Y'all see why she's gonna be on here a lot more. She is talking real talk, rated R, real relevant and refreshing. Now, Look, our time is right because I want to dig deeper. You got to come back. You got to come back because we got to dig deeper into how those mental barriers impact how the structural barriers are set up, even in school systems. Okay. So when I talk about that, there are a lot of teachers, especially first year teachers. I worked in Jefferson County Public School for 20 years. So I saw it. And one of the things that I am grateful to my parents for giving me is not only the experiences outside of where we lived. I lived in two places. I lived in the West End until I was 7, and then went to Shively, which was in 78. It was the suburbs because in my neighborhood, we were only the second Black family to be in there, and that was 78. We didn't get another Black family until the late 80s, 89, 90. So my home experience was, and plus we was one of the only houses that had a basketball court. Okay. So everybody came to our house. All the kids at that time, you gotta remember 78, 80, we was still, I remember at that time the KKK was walking down Dixie Highway. So it was still in that system. But in our home community, we were inclusive because kids want to play with kids. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I didn't care what their parents thought. We brought the parents together. And so when you do not have those experiences, when, say, you have those mental barriers and you become a principal of a school, which most of the time you're going to be a principal of a school at one of these struggling schools, you know, you bring that mindset without, like you said, connecting, then it creates an impact in the school for the children because you haven't made that connection. What have you seen you say you deal with youth. What are their biggest concerns, especially when it comes to school, that they want to change and nobody's hearing their voice?
Well, and I think that's such a good tie-in because especially the next time we get on, because I ain't gonna be able to fit it all in here. But it's what I do when I talk about being a social impact consultant and as a person with lived experience, and that is they're not being heard. You said it. That's it. They're not being heard. They're not being included in decisions that are being made about them and for them. Now, I understand it's a little different. It's an adult and a child, right? But there are still some things that we have to, if we are saying we want to build children up, we want them to be independent. We want them to be successful. We want them to be strong. We want them to have strong voices and to advocate for themselves, right? Have a strong sense of self-advocacy. But as children, even at 16, 17, you know what I'm saying, right? We don't let them have that till they're 18. And then we say, do it. But we never let them build those skills. That's real skills. Those are life skills. We don't let children be self-advocates.
Woo!
Place. Now, I'm not saying your child gotta tell you they want their bedtime at 11 p.m. and then you get it. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Hear me here. But you know, we have to be able to listen. If you have a principal, right, that comes from a very, very, very different set of lived experiences or has no lived experience with the population of children that they're working with, you know, I'm a firm believer in your village, your community around you. As a person, as a professional, you need to have a team around you to consult you. Don't be on people's emotional labor for free. At least pay for their dinner if you're gonna ask them, you know, questions. Or hire a consultant.
Principals have a budget. Don't let them fool you. They have a budget.
Or hire a consultant, hire a board, right? You can pay, you know, create a panel, create a community impact board, and have these folks that you are serving, not working for, not employed by, not hired to be. You are serving. You are a public servant. I am a servant leader, right? We're serving folks, and you need to bring those folks that you serve into the conversation. You need to allow them to help you craft and cultivate your decisions. And I
Savvy,
think
it's just simple asking, hey, what do you want? I'm focusing on schools. I'm a school director at adult high school. I was served as a school counselor, and one of my biggest clubs wasn't an athletic club, it wasn't creative club, it was a student leadership club. Savvy, when I came up with the student leadership club, I was doing it because that's the type of clubs I had growing up, and I had a voice. Okay, shaping our school. Now, yes, I went to a private school, so there was. But when I leaned back and I said, what was it about school that I enjoyed? Me having a voice, us planning, even in church. For one, my mama was whatever she was over, we were in, and so I learned the leadership skills. But when I was thinking, oh, this is going to be something that I like, I tailored it out through all the leadership organizations I had. I'm thinking this ain't going to be, I'm just going to have about 10, 12. Savvy, when I say I had 40 on the first year, then those 40 crafted what would be next. And it was like, I don't know if y'all seen Grease and the Pink Ladies and we had these cool student leadership shirts, and because they wanted them. This is something they wanted because I listened to them. Every event they planned, every dance they planned, they budgeted, they priced it because it was for them. And so what I saw was, let me ask you something,
not to interrupt you. Are you still in contact every once and again with some of those students?
Oh yeah.
How many of them?
And they are continuing.
Like, how many of them are using those skills, like in their life on a day?
Right now, yes, absolutely, all of them. And most of the clubs that they were in, they remember the leadership club, even today.
And that's what it is. When
it's what it is. Empowerment and impact.
Yep. And
they were heard.
That's why I love everything the Excel Center got. And I done did the thing. I done looked it up. That's all right.
But now I did the leadership club in Jefferson County. Now I'm slowly, because now I'm dealing with adults. And then I found out, Savvy, adults are no different than children. They want to be heard.
They want to be heard. And when we raise damaged children, right? And I don't even want to say raise, because nobody intends to raise a damaged child. But when we care for a damaged child growing up, and we don't provide them the life skills, and we don't let them self-advocate, and we kind of really direct that, we create damaged adults. And, it's so much harder. We're so much more flexible. Our brains are like little gymnasts when we're kids. The science shows that. Our brains are much more open, and they're flexible, and they want to understand, and they have room for these things. Yeah. But as we become adults, that elasticity in our brain, it ain't there. It ain't Simone Biles. Okay. Yeah. It's just not. So it makes it that much harder. So we, and we have to give that extra love and attention to the adults, and not throw those people away and say that they're a lost cause because they didn't get what they needed as a child. They didn't get the resources. And I think that applies across the board for a lot of people. A lot of people. You can be as wealthy.
It impacts community. It impacts homes.
Yeah. There's so many different cases. Yeah. I'm a firm believer.
So many. Listen, Savvy, you're gonna be on like really, really soon because we gotta dig deeper. I want the youth voice, and I think I'll have my niece on here. She was a part of that leadership club I had, and she's now working in so many youth things in the community. I can't even keep up with her now. But how can people connect with you and hire you to come to their organization? Because I'm going to talk to you offset, because I need your voice at the Excel Center, not only for our students, but for our staff. How can people connect with you, Savvy? Hughes?
Yeah, so you can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, I'm Savvy Hughes on everything. You can find me. If it goes by like a name, Facebook, LinkedIn, I'm Savvy Hughes. You can find me. I got tattoos and all my photos. I'm a ginger. You can't miss me. Yeah. You cannot miss me. And I'm like one of 3 Savvies in the city. So there's that. If you want to find me on Instagram, on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, it's 502 Savvy. So if it's anything that requires an @ sign or a $ in front of it, it is 502 Savvy. You can email me. It is SAV as in Victor, M as in Mary, Hughes, HUGHES @gmail.com. It is super easy to reach me. You can, once you find me, I'll give you my phone number.
That's right. She's gonna be on here a lot more. Savvy, we're gonna do some things for real. I need to talk to you. You're wise beyond your years. Listen, and I forgot. Let me shout out my sponsors, Tina Siemens. Sorry, her books are on Amazon. Get them now. Seminole, Post Oak, and The Little Center That Could. Big ups to my other sponsor, R&B Mobile Bartending, Rashayla Burns. That's my fam. If you have a adult graduation party, derby's coming up, whatever, get with Rashayla Burns, R&B Mobile Bartending. Savvy, before we leave, one thing that you want to leave with our audience, especially about making a difference when you think you don't have the dollars. What would you say?
If you think you don't have the dollars, it never starts with money. It never starts with money. And if you're thinking about dollars, you're thinking about the wrong thing. You got a good long-term goal. But if you want to get started, if you don't know where to start, go connect. You're not connected enough.
You heard her. She's only 25, y'all. This is why she's my niecey. She is my niece. I have adopted her as my niece. So she will be on this show a lot more. You got about 3 more days when you hear this. Go to todayswomannow.com. Vote for Savvy Hughes in the community. What category are you in?
I'm in public service.
Public service. You have until May 2nd at 12 noon. And then when you on that page, go up to education. Vote for your girl.
Go vote for Icy.
That's right. Go vote for me. Savvy, I will see you June 10th. Hopefully before then. I love you. Keep doing what you're doing. Until next time, Real Talk. Connect with Savvy. Get some enlightenment. Get some real relevant and refreshing information. All right. Love you, Real Talk. Bye-bye.